Hello everyone, this is Nitpicking Nerd, and today I want to talk about a theory of mine regarding Tuvok, and I'm going to talk about the history of the character. I'm going to talk about the fact that we saw a few people who look really similar to him in the other Star Trek shows. We saw him as a Klingon, we saw him as a human several times, and we also know that he was working undercover pretending to be a Maquis while in reality working for Captain Janeway. And eventually they all ended up on Voyager, and even on Voyager there were a lot of episodes in which Tuvok demonstrated his willingness to do all kinds of necessary evil actions. A lot of times he would be willing to violate Starfleet rules in order to accomplish something, and he was complicit with a lot of Janeway's decisions, which were also kind of going against Starfleet's rules a lot of times, and he was okay with that. And so I think I have enough evidence to build a case that he would be willing to join a group such as Section 31. Personality-wise, obviously he did perform as a spy for Starfleet, and obviously did do a lot of shady things across his career. And also there's the matter of the missing time in his Starfleet career, because we saw in one episode that he was an ensign on a Sulu's ship, the Excelsior, back in 2293, and yet he was just a lieutenant commander when serving on Voyager almost a century later. And it was explained in some episodes that he retired from Starfleet for a while. He spent a few years doing culinary, according to him, and he spent decades being a teacher, and only much later he rejoined Starfleet. But what if all of that time was just a cover story? What if he was actually doing things secretly during that time, and all of those stories were just his cover stories? And this is just a theory, but what if during all of that time he was going on secret missions, either for Starfleet intelligence or more likely Section 31, because some of the actions I'm going to theorize about wouldn't make sense if he was working for Starfleet, and it makes more sense if he was part of Section 31, who had no choice but to resort to all kinds of illegal things without leaving any trace, without making Starfleet or the Federation guilty of those actions. He was serving under Captain Sulu on the Excelsior. He also mentioned that he opposed the peace treaty with the Klingons, which might fit the kind of people that Section 31 were looking for, because they were not exactly looking for optimistic people who are too peace-loving, and rather prefer people who wanted to prepare for the wars and to eliminate potential enemies before they even become a danger. And so they would not be looking for a Vulcan who was too peace-loving. And so maybe the fact that Tuvok was mistrusting of the Klingons and was more militaristic was something that fit better personality-wise for the people they were looking for. So sometime later we saw Tuvok as a human serving on the Enterprise B, and he was apparently a lieutenant, and you can obviously see that his ear looks human and not a Vulcan. So it begs the question, why the need to disguise him as a human, and why put him under a different identity on the Enterprise B? And I think it might have to do with the fact that whoever placed him there knew that the Enterprise was soon going to encounter the El-Orient refugees. Those were Guinan's people. They had close encounter knowledge about the Borg, and that's something that Section 31 or Starfleet intelligence would be very curious about, and also wanted to keep secret from other people. They wanted one of their own agents to make first contact with those refugees, and maybe they needed a Vulcan to perform a mind meld on some of them to get the best possible information from them directly, and maybe even block some of their memories so that they wouldn't tell other people, because they wanted to keep it all secret and only know about it for themselves for this time. We do know that Starfleet knew about the Borg even before TNG. It was established in one episode of Voyager that Starfleet knew something about them even previously, but kept it secret. And it was always strange how come the El-Orients never told anyone about the Borg, if that's the enemy that destroyed them. So how come they didn't tell anyone? Unless they were told, all of this must be kept classified. Even Guinan didn't tell Picard about it for some reason. So it's possible that Starfleet intelligence had a talk with them, and in exchange of granting them asylum, they had to keep quiet about the Borg and only got debriefed by Starfleet intelligence. So it's possible they deliberately placed Tuvok on that ship in the last moment, so that he will make contact with those refugees and gain information from them, possibly using a mind meld, and disguised him as a human to hide his identity and to have a plausible deniability about this whole incident. And it's possible this was his first intelligence mission. Maybe this was the first time that he was undercover and possibly gain some extra knowledge on top of his mission, meaning maybe when he mind melded with Soran, he also gained from his mind his scientific knowledge, the fact that Soran later invented a device that is able to blow up stars. That is something very valuable, which I made a whole theory video about the fact that maybe Section 31 were the ones who blew up the Romulan star and destroyed the Romulan Empire. That is a whole separate topic, and it's possible that the origins of that plan originated from the knowledge they gained from Soran using Tuvok, who mind melded with him and gained that knowledge. And this also leads me to his appearance in TNG when he once again appeared as a human, as part of the terrorist group who was trying to steal Trilithium from the Enterprise D. Trilithium was already known as a highly toxic, very dangerous material, very volatile, that can be used to make bombs, which was never explained why that bomb was so dangerous, but presumably even a tiny amount of that material can cause a very big explosion, and so it would be a very effective kind of bomb that you can hide anywhere without anyone knowing. And as we later find out in Generations, Trilithium can also be modified into the weapon that can stop all fusion within a star and causing that star's collapse and basically blow up an entire solar system. And Trilithium was said to be a key component of that, and so maybe that was the real reason that Tuvok was placed into the team that was paid by someone to steal the Trilithium, because someone was planning to use that Trilithium for that purpose later on. And in this point, it must be Section 31 doing all of this, because if it was Starfleet intelligence, then they could have easily just got some Trilithium from a starship without going to all these dirty tactics, without having to use terrorists to do it. They could just take it directly from some starship. And the fact that they had to use an armed team of terrorists to accomplish that means that it was Section 31 operating outside of the rules, outside of the knowledge of Starfleet completely. And also because they planned ahead, they didn't want to implicate Starfleet itself in any way. If they were planning to use that Trilithium later on as part of a weapon of mass destruction, they could not make Starfleet look responsible. They could not make it known in any way that Starfleet was complicit. And so maybe that's why they had to stage the event of someone physically stealing it from Starfleet against Starfleet's will, so that if later it was found out that that Trilithium came from a Starfleet ship, then there would be plausible deniability. So that's why they had to steal it by force, using an armed group of terrorists from a Starfleet ship, so that later on Starfleet and the Federation will be blameless for all of this. And so that's why they paid a group of terrorists to steal it, and they planted Tuvok into that team to make sure that it gets into the right hands later on. Maybe Tuvok was supposed to steal it from the other group in the end, and then give it to Section 31. But of course that plan didn't work, because Captain Picard went back to the ship when he wasn't supposed to, and he encountered Tuvok in the corridor and had a fight with him and incapacitated Tuvok, which was pretty amazing. I guess the fact that he mind melded with Sarek and with Spock earlier gave him the ability to perform a Vulcan nerve pinch as well, and so he actually overpowered the Tuvok by using a nerve pinch, and later used the hypo spray on him. And presumably that guy died when the baryon sweep reached him, but if he was indeed a member of Section 31, then most likely he had some kind of long-range transporter lock on him, and they were able to beam him out before he got killed, and that's how he survived that incident. And later we saw him again in a Deep Space Nine episode called Invasive Procedures, in which he was disguised as a Klingon mercenary working for a Trill who wanted to steal the Dax symbiote for himself and was planning to go into the Gamma Quadrant to hide. So it begs the question, why would Section 31 want to put Tuvok disguised as a Klingon and pretend to be a mercenary to send him to Deep Space Nine? What was the point of that? And I think the answer is to get his hands on Odo and then to go into the Gamma Quadrant. This was before Starfleet was aware of the Dominion threat, but Section 31 probably knew about it already, and they might have already known that the Changelings are the founders of the Dominion, and because of the huge threat they posed, maybe they already were planning to infect them with the virus. And when Tuvok first arrives to Deep Space Nine, the first thing he does is to force Odo to go into that box where he can lock him and put him in stasis. And later on this team was planning to go into the Gamma Quadrant, presumably to hide. But what if his real mission was to take that box with Odo with him, to infect Odo without his knowledge with that virus, and then help Odo find his own people in the Gamma Quadrant, and that way to infect them. That was the plan of Section 31, which eventually they did fulfill a little bit later. It was stated by Bashir that the time in which Odo was infected was when he visited Starfleet headquarters, somewhere in Season 4 of Deep Space Nine, and in the end of that season he went into the Great Link and infected all of the founders. But what if Section 31 were actually planning to do that even earlier? And who knows, if they succeeded, maybe it would have prevented the entire Dominion War and would have disrupted the founders' plan to destabilize the Alpha Quadrant. If they would be unable to shapeshift as well as they did in Seasons 4 and 5, then they wouldn't be able to turn the Klingons against the Federation and all of that. So it would have been brilliant if Section 31 would have infected them a few years earlier. And so maybe that's why they sent Tuvok to pretend to be a Klingon mercenary, to go with a Trill guy to Deep Space Nine to steal the symbiote, and later to go into the Gamma Quadrant. And his real plan was probably to steal Odo, to take Odo with him, and to infect him while he's in stasis, and then to release him in the Gamma Quadrant somewhere close to the Dominion, so that his own people will find him, and when he links with them, he would infect them. And so that's probably was the purpose of him being there. And so all of that plan failed when Deep Space Nine managed to overpower these guys, and we never saw what happened with that Klingon. So presumably, once again, he got pulled out, and no one knows that it was Tuvok. Everyone thinks that was just some Klingon mercenary helping out some Trill guy, and so no one knows it was actually Tuvok working for Section 31. And very shortly after this, he became a spy within the ranks of the Maquis, and then they all ended up on Voyager. And presumably he was sent to the Maquis by Captain Janeway. So it's possible that Janeway was somehow involved in Section 31 as well. That wouldn't surprise me. Her entire voyage to the Delta Quadrant was not by accident. Maybe a lot of the stuff she did there was preordained and planned in advance, and so maybe it wasn't by accident. But I will leave all of that to a separate video, because this video is about Tuvok, and so presumably he spent a few decades while he wasn't officially in Starfleet to serve the Federation in other ways, in secret ways, and so presumably he went on a lot of clandestine missions, pretending to be different people and different aliens to either gain intelligence about potential threats or to actively try to fight those threats before they even became a danger to the Federation. And it's possible that in one of his many missions he was sent undercover into the ranks of the Imperial forces of planet Spaceball, which was probably deemed to be a very big threat to the Federation, because this was an evil empire that wanted to conquer other planets and sometimes would steal the atmosphere of an entire planet for themselves. And so maybe Tuvok was sent to infiltrate the ranks of that empire to get intelligence about them, and so he was serving as one of their soldiers for a while. But very quickly he realized that these species are not very intelligent. He would summarize it in his report that they are stupider than the Packleds and therefore do not pose any serious threat to the Federation, and that's when he was recalled. And planet Spaceball was classified as non-threatening because even though they had some formidable technology of being able to steal entire atmospheres of planets, but they were very lacking in other areas of technology. For example, their transporter technology was in its infancy and would often malfunction, and their weapon systems were inferior, and so they were not considered a threat after Tuvok's close assessment of them. And in his own words, he said he didn't find shit. And so that was presumably one of his many clandestine missions. And eventually he ended up on Voyager, and Voyager did end up basically saving the entire galaxy and all of the Federation in a few events, and so it's possible that their presence in the Delta Quadrant was not an accident at all, but I will leave that theory to a separate video in the future. So let me know what you think, and we can discuss all of this in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button, please subscribe, click the notification bell to see updates of new videos, check out all the links in the description below, and I will see you all next time. Bye bye.